Excited touched me inappropriately. Welcome to Barely Interesting episode 11, and welcome Excited Utterance joining us here today.
Hello.
Hello. So we had day 12 of the trial. Day 12 of the trial consisted of one and only one witness, surprisingly, Vincent Corleone from The Godfather. He was there testifying all day. And the theme for today, I try to come up with themes for as much of these episodes as I can. The theme for today is don't ever talk to the police, because the innocent little mistakes that you might say or even construed to have said could come back and bite you. Or the fact that, I drive my minivan regularly could come back to haunt you.
He didn't say that. He said, I drive my Audi. So,
he drives his Audi. Anyways, but the question was still there as to which vehicle he drives primarily, right? And and that could be construed a bunch of different ways, including even Zach denying that he ever used a tracker to track Sadie, right? That denial was used. Well, we don't care about that because he's already a liar. We know he's lying and he denied it. Therefore, he's lying. So, but if you don't ever talk to the police, if you exercise your fundamental rights from the get-go, they can't even talk about that at all. So don't ever talk to the police. That's kind of like the overarching theme that I gathered from all of today was don't ever talk to the police. But we had Mr. Corleone. I don't even know how is Correa. I don't know how you say his actual name, but I'm going to go with
Korea.
Korea. Okay.
Korea.
We'll go with Korea.
Yeah.
Korea was
South Korea.
Korea was there all day, and we have a bunch to talk about today, even though it was just one witness.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. They brought back intentionally the phrase cadaver dogs. Now, we touched on this already in a previous episode, and the judge made a ruling. This was first mentioned by the witness himself, stating cadaver dogs in one of the searches, I think, on the tree farm this time, and then gravely asks cadaver dogs in question that did a cadaver dog hit on something, which was something that did not sit well with the judge. He brought it back again, completely ignoring the judge's order, and pushed it in, and then intentionally mentions cadaver dogs over and over and over in front of the jury during the litigation to try and drive the point home. And it's courtroom manipulation, but watching him operate what he's doing intentionally, it was absolute. He knew what he was doing. There was no question about it. He was doing it on purpose so he could try and hammer that nail.
And that brings us to our latest episode of The More You Know. Now, mind you, I had to cut it down because these things are like a minute long, but there's so much more to this. I highly recommend you guys go back and check it out.
Did the cadaver dogs hit on anything?
Objection.
Well, let me finish the question.
No, because then it's argumentative, and we've had a prior ruling on this issue.
And my recollection is that I did sustain an objection along the same line.
Yeah, my recollection is that the court allowed me only to ask whether a cadaver dog caused the officer to then direct theirself in any location, but to provide no further details. So I thought the court allowed me that one question with no inquiry.
I thought it was without the reference to it being a cadaver dog.
Okay, so that's not my recollection, and I defer to the court. It's been a long court. It's been a long case, and any of these rulings would have been day 1 or 2. If I did use the word hit, I would have done that in error.
And I was uncomfortable with your describing the dog as a cadaver dog. Well, the bottom line is I'm going to sustain the objection.
The objection was sustained, but the damage was already done because this is so many times that a cadaver dog hitting on something was referenced. Now, you can try to spin that as a defense counsel and say, look, they brought in cadaver dogs. These dogs are trained to find dead bodies, and it didn't find anything, right? But why do we have to do this when the judge has already ruled multiple times? Motions in limiting, I believe, as well on this before the trial even started, that we're not going to talk about cadavers, or cadaver dogs. We're not going to talk about hits and anything like that because that's it's putting an inappropriate idea in the jury's mind. Yet he continues to do it over and over.
Yeah,
and it's not the only
I forgot.
situation where he's where Gravely is inserting fluff and mostly irrelevant information for the sake of manipulating the jury. And they go through this, and a lot of today's testimony, a lot of today's direct examination had a lot to do with trying to argue against the defense's narrative that the police investigation was inept. And he makes a solid argument for the amount of time spent, but it has nothing to do with the quality. He's got quantity, but not quality. And what they didn't do a good job, I think, the defense was really differentiating between that in the counter argument today. Hella, did you have any thoughts on that?
Are we talking about the cadaver dog?
No, we're talking about the garbage
manhunt,
dump.
the amount
the
of
man
Manhunt.
hours.
Yeah, the
the
manhunt.
manhunt, the amount of hours, the amount of agency.
Oh, that. I've got a clip on that if you want it.
Yeah, are you ready for it?
Yeah, I do actually. Hang on just a second. Just give me 1 second to pull it up because I had that one ready.
I was messaging you in private chat, and I was like, "Get it ready."
Well, hang on a second. I have it, and we'll bring it up. Yeah. Okay. So
Indicated dogs were, a dog was.
Not dogs. Not the cadaver dogs.
Which one you hitting?
Actually, that weirdly enough, they were just talking about the cadaver dogs, and then they got to
Employed
that.
at the search warrant on the 20th of May
get a bit
at
louder,
Quan
please.
House. Based on the dog's activities, and I don't need to know the details, but were certain pieces of evidence prioritized, and did you then take those and do further things with those?
Yeah,
Yes.
this is where it starts. Yeah.
How many
Again.
search
It
warrants
just says yes.
physically do you believe were conducted in this investigation, during the course of this investigation?
Here we go. How many search warrants? How many this? How many that?
You're talking about like electronics and like as many warrants.
When I'm talking about physical searches of
Okay.
locations.
One,
He's got to count on his fingers.
I believe 5 locations. But some of the locations had multiple days. So there were, I guess, multiple warrants because they were different days.
So all told, how many search warrants do you believe you executed that were physical locations?
I believe 8.
Okay. How many agencies other than the Kenosha Police Department do you believe you involved in some fashion in this case? Just your estimate.
18.
So how many different folks that have some law enforcement role do you believe have spent some time investigating this case?
I would say close to 100 total officers.
Oh my God.
And you personally, what would be your estimate on how many man hours that you have put in this case over the last several years?
Maybe a couple thousand.
Holy
Couple
moly.
thousand man hours from this one officer, and he said there were 100 officers involved with this, but they had to stop searching the garbage dump, even though there was plenty of indication that there was potentially evidence, and maybe even Rosalio himself at this garbage dump. They had to pull it off, or they had to pull the guys off to allocate resources to what? A tree farm? They had to pump the septic somewhere, right? I mean,
Zach's
but
house. Because
yeah.
the carpet was missing in the back 2.5 feet of Zach's van. So that's his rationale, is that they didn't have the man hour to spread out over both search locations. And Zach's house is so suspicious because there's some carpet cut out of the back, a filthy van full of debris, construction waste next to a dumpster full of construction waste. It's with a trailer full of construction waste. It was illogical for them to follow that. Now, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have looked into Zach. I've never said that. I actually understand that they would look into Zach, but later on in today's trial, we actually have Korea admitting to cross-examination that they never looked at another person to ever be at Rosalio's house. They never actually investigated anyone else. And that
wasn't it on cross-examination today that he admitted to not getting a lot of the dumps, a lot of the cell phone data, or following up on things. Not Mike, but well, they didn't really follow up with Mike. What's his name? Oh my God, I'm missing the names. Campbell. They didn't follow up with Mike Campbell until the Denny motion.
It's Hunt.
Correct.
Yeah, so they didn't. So they didn't look at him. They didn't ask for his phone. They didn't do any of that stuff. That was brought up in cross, I believe, as well. A lot of the other things too is they brought up a lot of again, irrelevant information, such as Zach searched on his computer for tracking devices that you install on vehicles. And he searched for quite a bit. The one clever thing that I thought, and I didn't think it went far enough, is that Nicole brought up like the really stupid searches that were in his
Twitter,
search engine. It was
the Twitter Twitter
like
post
new species discovered or something, and then there was like, what's the weather in Milwaukee, and just all this irrelevant stuff. And it was like, so was he part of some conspiracy to follow new species? Maybe he was making them. I don't know. I would have pushed harder on that thing. That's kind of what I was getting at. Just all the irrelevant stuff. Oh, you have the site. You have the video with the dump site being abandoned.
Yep.
All
right, let's pull that up because this is interesting. This is it, right?
This was a kick in the stomach for me in the courtroom.
Yeah,
it was bad.
So during the course of that evening, we had done, I guess collectively, the police department had done interviews with Miss Beecham as well as with the daughter. And based on those interviews, and in speaking with the district attorney's office, I had prepared a search warrant for the defendant's address up in the Mequon area. And based on officers' response later on in the evening hours, which went into the early morning hours, we had believed that there was a high probability that evidence would be located at that residence, at which point we did not have the capacity to continue to do two major site investigations at once. And again, based on the landfill, we were holding up their operations, I guess.
Oh, sorry.
So they stopped
based on what you
So they stopped looking in the landfill because, well, we have our suspect already. We don't need to find the victim.
Right. What if the murder weapon was in the trash? What if Rosalio's body was in the trash? All they did was abandon the possibility of ruling that out. And it just blew me away in the moment, just listening to him rationalize why they wouldn't just look. They already had the site. They already had it sequestered, but they didn't want to dig through the trash. That was probably more of the issue. And
the other thing to think about too, what he just said there, in conversations with the DA's office,
right,
we decided to issue a warrant for Zach's house. It's not the investigators, it's not the police leading this investigation. it sounds like it's the DA's office that's giving directives. And that's not a normal role. This is the same DA who inserted himself as a witness in
Yep.
2 different scenarios where the stories changed after he met with them. He's inserting himself as an investigator, which is not the role of the district attorney.
Interesting that you say that. I think that begs a deeper conversation about immunity and where the line is on where you have prosecutorial immunity. And Correa made a statement during today's testimony where he said that he was working with the district attorney's office to determine what items needed to be sent for testing with the crime lab, which meant that the DA's office was giving directive on what they wanted to have tested at the crime lab, which is a little sketchy that they're working actively with the investigators to do that. Why are they involved? Why are the investigators not just doing that independently? And that raised the question in my mind, because technically, to legal standards, as far as I understand, it's already been established in a different state, in a different district court. A prosecutor's immunity ends when they stop performing their role as a prosecutor. When they turn into an investigator and they meet a witness at a crime scene or at a scene to then become an investigator independently, they've now abandoned their immunity as a prosecutor. It's an important idea to discuss.
So that issue was addressed day 2 or 3, I can't even remember, day 3 with the other witness, the Facebook girlfriend. But he has an ethical obligation here too. So not only is there a potential immunity thing, but he's got an ethical obligation, and he puts himself in conflict. And the judge even addressed it. I think it ended up being one of our the more you know sort of situations.
Yep.
But the rules are not for this particular DA. He's going to do what he's going to do. He's going to ask leading questions. Oh my God, the leading questions. You know what? Actually, and so Hella, you noticed something about who was asking the questions on direct examination.
Okay, so it started off with the assistant DA, and that went for about an hour or so, and then all of a sudden Gravely just took over. It was just
after break.
Yeah. It was just like, okay, she didn't do a good enough job. Now I'm just going to start feeding the witness all these leading questions. It was ridiculous. In fact, I have the point when it happened.
Well, yeah, and so the thing is, it does happen during a break, but you can tell before that the examination isn't really going the best. It was like, yeah, okay, I got some cell phone data and this and that.
Yeah.
It's not really strong. But then when Gravely is allowed to ask whatever questions he wants in a leading format, I have notes too. What was it?
Yeah.
Hang on, where are my notes? Oh yeah, then the DA is allowed to object, essentially arguing that the unfinished unfinished investigation has nothing to do with the location of. Yeah. So there was on cross-examination of this witness, Nicole was asking about whether or not they tried to track down Rosalio's father in order to get a more precise DNA profile for Rosalio, since that's kind of key in this case. And she was shut down, or she was objected to first by Gravely. And in so doing, while he's arguing this in front of the jury, not arguing, he's supposed to be just making an objection. He ends up making an argument that this unfinished investigation trying to track down Rosalio's father has nothing to do with this case, and it's completely immaterial. Essentially, making an argument in front of the jury to completely disregard all the cross-examination you've just heard. That was highly inappropriate. And the judge was just like, well, let me just, it's not material. Actually, so the judge finished the argument for him by telling the jury that it's not a material issue. And we're going to move on now.
Yeah. It's just like, it's your witness. You can't just lead him like that.
Yeah, it was so bad.
It was
Well, I mean,
crazy.
you just played a clip, and it's very similar to Lisa Treffinger in how he's asking the questions.
Yes.
He's giving them yes, no. So
Yes.
it's gravely testifying, and the witness giving yes, no's or agreeing or disagreeing with what he's saying. And that itself is disturbing because he's creating a narrative in presenting information, misinformation, cherry-picked information, and building, this story to then present to the jury in his closing argument. And it's not even the witnesses that are providing the facts. And this is an issue that I have with this, is that we talk about juries needing to find the facts in the case, and that is what the jury's role is. But if the facts aren't even presented by the witnesses, then where are the facts coming from?
Yeah, and see, that's the thing that most people get upset about with leading questions on cross-examination. I don't care if you're the defense or the state. They're like, well, how are they allowed to ask leading questions? Because then it's the attorney testifying.
Yeah.
And in reality, that's what it is. The attorney, it's not testifying. The attorney is giving an affirmative statement and the witness is confirming it or denying it. That's all. But it's all that's why leading questions are prohibited on direct, because they're so persuasive. And you give the benefit of the doubt to the one that's defending against the witness, right? So when you're allowed to do it indirect and cross, you can frame the entire narrative. Or, another major issue is, like I said before, the speaking objections, because essentially you're allowed to argue in front of the jury what your position is. And it's really bad. It's just really bad procedurally. It's not in the interest of justice. It takes away from what Solomon just said, that the jury is supposed to be the finders of fact.
Yes.
So we had, in addition to that, we also had some voice memos, which was interesting because I didn't think about it until literally just today. When I set up my phone to do like directions, navigation through Google or whatever, sometimes I'll lose my cell service, especially if I'm up in the UP or anything like that. But it still runs, right? It still tells me, oh, you got to turn left here and turn right here. So it's stored, obviously. But I never think about it. I don't think that, it's stored in the memory. And then at some point, it just deletes. But it's done automatically. This was completely lost, I believe, on the defense. Because what we had today was the state presenting driving directions that were partially deleted driving directions, so we could only able to recover some before Zach deleted them. And
Deleted them.
I didn't hear any cross-examination regarding, well, we don't have all the cross, right? We don't finish cross today.
No.
So maybe it's tomorrow. I'll have to watch it more carefully. But I don't remember a whole lot of cross-examination, at least not today, about that particular issue.
No.
And that driving directions, period, just automatically get deleted, probably as new information is needing to be stored.
But I think that the problem was, it was going to be, is this the correct person to ask that question to? And then we have a foundational issue where the witness doesn't have the expertise to really testify to what the phone will do automatically with a temporary file like that. And how often it clears its cache. You would need to bring on an expert in the defense to then discuss how the phones work and how it would do it automatically, as opposed to Zach manually going through to delete those directions. They tried to spin it as something nefarious, but it doesn't even. It's so disingenuous because who has ever gone through to delete the actual voice, driving directions?
I set it up so like unused stuff gets deleted automatically.
Right.
Exactly. I have never ever in my life, I wouldn't know how to delete like this Siri voice message audio files. That would take someone with a fair bit of like savvy, like tech savvy on phones. I don't, your brother, is he tech savvy in that way, Solomon? No.
he still used a flip phone until he needed it to like play music and do stuff, with the
Yeah.
kids and stuff like that. So
It,
he was
he
a
did-
flip phone user. He didn't
he
use
loved his
smart-
flip phones.
So we have another clip. As you can
Yeah.
tell, this is very much an EU style show. We have another clip here we're going to play, and then I have some questions
Hey,
for
but
Solomon.
there's no little cockroach gravelies. I didn't have time for that. So,
Right.
yeah. I can bring those up if you want, just for fun later if we have time.
No.
Okay,
Is
so
it
it
playing?
is actually, hang on, it's playing. Why isn't it playing? Come on, play. They're just not saying anything right now.
Take the next left
Oh,
toward
yeah.
Wisconsin 31 South, then turn.
Come on. Come on.
No, they're
It's
playing.
Exhibit
It's
1352.
just those little clips.
Audio clip number
Yeah.
32, May 13th, 9:25 p.m.
Look what Zach just did. He just went, what?
The next left onto 12th Street, Summers Road.
States 1, number 353, from May 13th, 9:25 p.m.
You on 12th Street for 1 mile.
That one seemed to skip at the beginning. I'm just going to play that one again.
You on 12th Street for 1 mile.
Guilty.
And then States Exhibit 1, number 354, May 13th at 9:28 p.m.
Quarter mile, turn left onto 15th Street.
So, Detective, did those sound like the same audio clips that you listened to from that Moto G6?
Yes.
And what about those directions was relevant to your investigation that caused you to think that they had some sort of evidentiary worth?
Well, they appear to be directions that would be possibly coming from, I guess, the north, coming into the Kenosha area. I know that 12th Street is Highway E, which runs east and west. And 15th Street is the, Mr. Gutierrez lived at 3709 15th Street.
Okay. So here are my questions for you then. Where is
Yeah.
that on this map? Is that in like Kenosha area?
Yeah,
Is that
12th
down
Street
here?
is down there. Yeah, 12th Street is the exit, and then 15th is after that.
Okay.
Listening to the directions, it actually sounded like it was directions coming from Sadie's house. So
Now, why do you say that?
Because very early on, the directions say in a quarter mile, turn right onto the ramp for 45 south. And it's approximately how far it is from the turn near Sadie's house to get to the freeway to then turn onto the on-ramp of the freeway. She lived
Okay, so you're just
This is
measuring it
correct.
off the distance from the last turn.
Yeah, so it says in a quarter mile, turn right onto the I-45 south ramp. And that turn to turn right on 45 south would be coming from the west to turn right going to the south. And so
Now, did Zach live from the west as well?
Zach lived on the east side of Highway 45 south.
Okay.
He lived west of Highway 43. And
So he would have turned now the
He would've-
on-ramps could go, you could have the corkscrew on-ramp where you turn right to get on the on-ramp.
not that one.
Okay. So why wasn't, I mean, did the defense know about this at the time?
I don't know. And I'm honestly not sure why they didn't argue it. And maybe they just didn't care enough, because who knows? But they could have brought in anyone to at least testify that it was an automatic, deletion of a temporary file as opposed to a manual deletion. Because I feel like they were allowed to try and spin it like it was something in a bad light.
Well, here's the other thing too. there were some of them that were like cut off mid-syllable, right? So obviously it sounds like a corrupted file.
Yeah.
Like if you delete something on your computer, it's not deleted. You're just telling the computer that this is space that you can write something new on, right? And so until there's like partially written stuff, the data is still there. But if you write over a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit here, then you get these small little chunks. And it's almost like corrupted data because it's cut off like mid-syllable.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem like something that would manually be deleted. If you're going to delete something manually, you just
delete the whole
delete
thing.
it. Yeah,
Yep.
right. So I have an issue with that. And then the other thing is did they identify what phone this was?
A G6, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Samsung
And
G6.
the G6, was that the one that was supposedly dropped in Sadie's car or taken by?
There are multiple G6s. So they talked about that like very early on. So we don't know if it's a G6 that Sadie had. Honestly, I have no idea. So it could have been Sadie driving down and using it for directions and then switching the phones when she had them at some point. I honestly don't know. But I mean, even if it was in Zach's possession, just because there's directions going down there doesn't mean that he was. And if he did, it also doesn't mean that he went to Rosalio's house. So none of those things are guaranteed to be true. There's reasonable doubt in every piece of that discussion.
A lot of doubt.
But
what
this also
did they say that this
kind of
recording was
direction.
made?
The 13th, 12th or 13th?
Okay.
The 13th,
Okay, so now it's the 12th or 13th, which is the day that Sadie had the phone with her, that she admitted to having the phone with her because she found it in the car and admitted to driving down to Kenosha that day. So, again, I mean, we have somebody saying, yes, I have one of Zach's phones that day. No, I did not give it back to him until several days later. Or like the next day or whatever it was. And yes, I went down to Kenosha that day. How is that not, I don't know. How is it just not hammered more?
I don't know.
The more and more I think about this case, like I was really pro defense. I was like, oh my God, he's not guilty.
Yeah.
But I feel like I had just that gut instinct and I was never convinced by the state. But as I'm re-examining the defense, I'm a little concerned that there might have been some substantial issues that the defense left unaddressed. And that's unfortunately ineffective assistance counsel is not going to be grounds for an appeal at this level. I don't know. What do you think, Excited?
But but I think what was left unaddressed is more towards the stalking charges, to be honest.
Yeah. But the stalking is the motive, right? I mean, but for
motive.
the stalking, there would be no motive.
Jealousy is
Well,
the motive.
Motive's not a motive. Motive's not important though. Like we don't need motive.
No, but juries want to hear motive. If you don't have motive, it's going to be hard for the jury to convict.
Yeah, right.
Yes, but that's we're talking about appeal, not retrial.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm just talking about the trial itself right now. I was going back to the trial itself. Like if they could winnow down the stalking allegations to essentially non-existent, like if they convinced the jury that there was no stalking, I don't think he'd be convicted at the end of the day. That's kind of what I'm saying. Yeah,
100%. But if we had trial back over again, we'd do defense different.
I would agree that if they had the opportunity to do the trial over again, that the defense could have done a lot of things much better. But to be fair, the prosecution, they shit the bed repeatedly. Their witnesses didn't testify the way they needed them to. They changed their narrative after opening statements. So they gave this opening narrative, this opening statement, and then they changed half of the assertions from their opening statements to warp it into the closing statements, which we'll get into coming Wednesday. But we've already seen the inconsistencies with witness testimony. But we also have inconsistencies with the narrative of the the license plate and the registration lookup, and that was argued today as well with Korea. They talk about his internet search history, Zach's internet search history, and but they've already tried to establish that Zach did take something out of Rosalio's van or out of his truck, and then had it at his home. And they tried to present the one photograph of that document as some sort of proof. But the reality is that the internet search history, when he's looking it up, it actually shows that he's looking for a Colorado license plate lookup.
Correct.
So why would he need to look for the owner of the Colorado plate if he had the registration and the name off of that letter?
Oh, Lao Kong is saying freezer. There was cross-examination about whether or not the detective, whatever his name is, Corleone, whether or not he searched in the freezer, and that was objected to by the state. And the judge was like, well, it wasn't in the warrant to look in the freezer. Okay, so this is the classic thing, right?
I can look that up if you want.
You can't. So if you get a search warrant to say we're looking for firearms, right? It doesn't authorize you to go looking through shoe boxes because a rifle is not going to fit in a shoebox. That's the classic example. But I'm pretty certain, I haven't seen the warrant. I'm almost positive it says search the entire premises for any evidence of the crime, the blood, or whatever. And so it would probably encompass going in the freezer. It would probably encompass going in every door, every drawer, every closet, everything, right?
Yep.
So to say, well, we didn't have a search warrant that covered the freezer is BS. But the earlier officer, Anschutz, testified that they did search the freezer, right? If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure he said that they searched the freezer.
What day was Anschutz?
I believe that Anschutz said that he looked at the freezer.
Yeah. He was day 3, I believe.
Well, he's pretty blind then, if that's the case.
Day 2 or 3. Yeah, but no, he said he searched in the freezer. Either way, to say it's disingenuous today to say that, well, we didn't have a warrant to search in the freezer. That's why we didn't search in it. It was, yeah.
Oh,
but
Jen saying Anschutz denied looking in the freezer, but Gravely says otherwise.
So Gravely said, "Oh, you looked in the freezer, right?" And Anschutz said, "No, I don't think I looked in the freezer." Okay, so that's what happened. I knew it was mentioned with him.
Yeah.
So,
well, we also have the anonymous Crime Stopper tips. This is something that's super important because they went into this discussion of chasing every viable lead. They even went and picked up a belt from the bushes across the street, right? They went and looked at where hunters were walking around on an 80-acre tree farm in the off season where people hunt, things like that. So he testifies to that, but they conveniently leave out that an anonymous tip pointed out that Nick Mercier had made a social media post stating that he knew who did it and then was told to take it down and redacted it, but they never interrogated Mercier, who was in and out of police custody. He was in KCDC. They had him in their hands repeatedly during this time period that they were waiting for this trial. They could have questioned him at any time. They didn't care.
They had their focus on their one and only suspect, and all they needed to do was find the evidence that they were confident were going to convict them. There was an interview I was listening to talking about police investigations. There's 2 phases. The one is investigation, and the other one is essentially prosecution. And when you flip too quickly from one to the other, you lose track of maybe the actual suspect, the whole picture, the panoramic view, if I was to quote Gravely. All right. So did you want to pull up one more clip, Solomon, or did you want to address something else?
No, we're actually going to be running out of time. I did want to point out that on cross, that Nicole even asks Korea if they looked into anyone else, ever, for the sake of anyone being at Rosalio's apartment. And he openly admits on the stand, nope, that they never looked into anyone else. Even with Narita admitting she was at the crime scene or adjacent to the crime scene in the parking lot, that she was supposed to be there during the alleged time of the crime.
Correct.
We had not a single person that the police even bothered to think about investigating, because they took Sadie's bait hook, line, and sinker.
And he admitted that too. Like, it was actually stated at one point that like Gravely, in a leading question, said to Korea, "Oh, so after speaking to Ms. Beecham and Mr. Campbell, did that give you I think the wording was, give you an opportunity to focus your investigation at that point?" And he said yes. And the thousands of hours, all of those different locations that were there were warrants for, all those different parties that were involved, they all focused their investigation on that one person. And so the defense's assertion right at the beginning that there was a shoddy police investigation, they're trying to use this as a way to say, oh, no, there was no shoddy police investigation. Look at all these resources that were put in. Well, there you go. The resources were all put into one man.
Well, the resources were. The evidence wasn't. What was the guy's name that that you mentioned earlier that they had in custody?
Nick Mercier.
Nick Mercier. What was his connection again?
He was, a local. He appears to be an addict or drunkard that has a bit of a reputation in Kenosha for running over his girlfriend at a bar.
See, I feel like this is more random or financial, if anything, right? I think Gosney said early on, like, all the signs is that this is financial, or it could have been completely random.
Well, it could be spurned, a spurned lover. Rosalio had an approach with women, and I don't mean just like some women that he was interested in. I mean all women. And if you were to read his text messages, you would probably be uncomfortable. And
you saying there's never a woman that he came across that he didn't immediately fall in love with?
I don't know that there is really, and it's pretty apparent. So it's just something that, as we've been able to read some of it, that it's very off-putting. And some of these women, some of these women are like married. Some of them are in relationships. Like, we have no idea if someone saw it or was told about it, and there was blowback from that. But it's something possible that the police never even bothered looking into. And there's a lot. So this is
how you just explained it, though, right now, is way better than any of the defense attorneys explained it during the trial.
Yeah. So going back to the theme of today, because we're actually kind of running out of time. We have the theme of today being, don't talk to the police, because they're going to cherry pick anything that you say, even if you're innocent of a crime, and try and make it sound like you're not believable, trying to present a reality where you weren't trying to tell the truth and may have been naturally mistaken. What we end up having in situations like this, where the cops aren't being forthcoming, where they're not doing their job effectively, where the DA's office is defrauding the court and manipulating like this, we have a situation that has completely undermined the FCA community's faith in the justice system as a whole. And I really hear this time and time again, this narrative that watching more trials, it bothers the people in the FCA community, now that they've seen Zach's case and how gross these people operate, how poorly they treat the accused, and how they manipulate and lie to try and build a narrative on media, we have this shift where it's undermining the integrity or the trust in the people that we're supposed to be able to trust to uphold justice. And that's
I can tell you, it's not just these big cases that it happens to. It happens every day, thousands of cases, the ones that you never hear of.
Yeah.
The same stuff is being pulled. I could go into it forever and ever, but we are out of time. Tomorrow's a big day. Tomorrow is day 13 of the trial, and we start the defense's case in chief. This is the last witness. Corleone is the last witness. We finish up his cross-examination tomorrow, and then we go into the state's case in chief with the best witness to hit the ground running with, in my opinion, and that is the state's own other forensic analyst. So that's, you don't want to miss that. Remember, Solomon and I are both streaming the trial again every 9 a.m. Eastern or 8 a.m. Central every morning, and then we come right back here and do this. Was there anything else you wanted to say about tomorrow?
Valhalla Awaits is supposed to be our guest of honor tomorrow. So
that's right. We should probably tell him that.
We should probably tell him that. I was
tell
there
him there's work to do too. You don't get away with this without doing work. I was doing it during my sleep. By the way, it was like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Oh, God, shut up.
You live on the wrong side of the planet. I'm sorry.
That's you people. You live on the wrong side of the planet.
What do you mean, you people?
Your barricades.
Thank you very much for joining us. Excited Utterance. Everyone go check out Excited Utterance, because I don't have her stuff pinned in my description, but I'll get it there.
Everyone knows who I am. I'll see you guys on Thursday night for Free Zachariah Anderson, Not a Murderer.
All right. Good night.
Yeah.